I would like to invite Professor Paul Pangaro, who is the president of the American Society of Cybernetics, to provide his presentation on Margaret's elegant question and NewMacy in the 21st century.
Thank you very much, Igor. Thank you, everyone. Let me share screen in all of the appropriate ways to begin. There we are. So again, thank you for your attention today. I come to you from the US, from Pittsburgh at Carnegie Mellon. Thanks to the WOSC organizers, especially Igor, for his tireless support and encouragement. And these slides, by the way, can be found at this link at the bottom of the screen. They're there along with some other materials if you may wish to follow along. Also, let me say that presentations feel very 20th century. I prefer conversation for those of you who know my work. But the slides are an attempt to be a hybrid, to be a way of presenting and also bridging to other materials, to creating conversations of your own, and as an invitation to be in touch in future. So please feel free to be in touch with me. Margaret Mead, founder of the American Society for Cybernetics, obviously a towering figure in anthropology and in cybernetics and second order specifically. She felt compelled to recommend during a meeting of an organization that became the ISSS that this formulating this nascent society should turn the precepts of its field upon itself to apply cybernetics, of course, the seeking of understanding of purpose and action, to the organization that she was a part of, to understand the role of purpose in its own actions. And in that meeting, as a result of her humble and self-aware offer, she was, in her own words, slapped down without mercy. Now, I'm no Margaret Mead, but I know an opportunity for systems in cybernetics when I see one, or perhaps see many, more than one. What is a pandemic? So let's channel Heinz von Förster for a moment by invoking the etymology of the word pan, all. Demos, same root as democracy, which comes, of course, from the idea of people, but people rooted in a particular land, in a collective that is joined together by living together in the same place. Pandemics. Well, clearly there are many pandemics of today's world. You need not have my litany, there are many litanies. Population and climate, food and water, poverty and healthcare, inequality and racism, disinformation and artificial intelligence. This is a particular interest of mine, as you'll see. Any pandemic is a crisis, a systemic calamity. And this entanglement of all of these pandemics that I've mentioned are so much more in this modern age. Something negative that affects us all. I say that the internet and digital devices, which connect 4 billion people, have today's AI inside. It's a technology we touch every day. And I say, and many others say, I'm hardly the only one, that today's AI foments this polarization that we see in so many states as well as globally. And it pushes irrelevant products and bias and so on. So its impact on our daily living is growing every day. So I call this a pandemic of today's AI. I don't mean all artificial intelligence, but I mean the kinds that are in our face and in our worlds every day. And these are some of the places where we see these. 4 billion are online. These are the gargantuan internet platform companies that dominate our time and attention and emotions. And there's no countervailing force to rein them in. Norbert Wiener, you'll be familiar with, he wrote, how many years ago? 80, 70, with a concern for automation. Automation comes from code. I would say that code and automation codifies or creates a codification of values. You'll also know the work of Joe Weizenbaum and his book, Computer Power and Human Reason. Fantastic juxtaposition. So these are pandemics, and these are my focus for today. There's a lot going on with today's AI. This phrase, human downgrading, comes from Tristan Harris and his organization. But here's the summary. AI makes the world we see and the world we live in. I know, not 100%, but more than I think it should. And so, where to begin? We have a blank slate. Well, let's see, is it really blank? Here we are of the world of systems and cybernetics. I believe that this affords a very powerful way of responding to these pandemics. Maybe we can be a bit more specific. Many of you know that cybernetics is at the origin of neural nets and of AI. AI was largely a response to cybernetics from the Dartmouth conference in the late 50s. I noticed that students today barely know this history, and they barely know that today's AI came from these things, and they hardly know anything about cybernetics at all. They think it's robotics or cyborgs or sometimes freezing dead people, believe me. But what are these differences? Now, here's an example of a slide that I don't wish to go into fantastic detail, but to give you a flavor of it, a flavor of what I'm trying to say. Here's a set of distinctions between cybernetics and today's AI. As I'll argue further later, today's AI also became an industry promoted by digital. And cybernetics is yet more universal. I don't think I need to sell this to this community. It's largely reduced to this prefix cyber, which is largely misunderstood. Cybersecurity.
Oh, how do you share your screen?
I've been sharing my screen the whole time. Do you not see it?
No.
I see it on my screen. I'm also logged in. Do others see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
we saw it. Yes.
It's local to you, Raul.
Everybody see.
Yeah, that's all right. I don't see it. I'm going to. Okay, go ahead, please. Sorry to interrupt.
Thank you. Yeah. So I'm claiming that cybernetics can move us forward. The question is how? Well, in terms of its history, as I've said, it came before AI. It embodies purpose. Hello, that seems valuable. Regulation in complex adaptive systems in its first order form. Its ethics, invoking Heinz von Foerster, in its second order form. It's transdisciplinary, or as Pickering would prefer, anti-disciplinary. It applies across silo disciplines. This feels very powerful to me. And ultimately, it embraces the unknowable and the unpredictable. And surely, pandemics are unknowable and unpredictable. So back to Margaret. We have an opportunity to consider Margaret's elegant invitation to apply the precepts of cybernetics to ourselves. Her context, of course, was to become ISSS. WOSC, as I understand it, can be thought of as an organization of organizations, an entanglement of organizations, a second order organization. Can we help? What can we bring? But I'm not satisfied just with conversation. I prefer conversation to presentation, but I also prefer action to conversation. Conversation is key, of course. We have to converse to agree if we are going to work together, if we're going to coordinate our actions. But of course, that may be a little deceptive. This is a nuance. We don't need to just talk and talk and talk before we act. We can act to see. Heinz von Foerster. If you wish to see, learn how to act. Inevitably, we're in a loop, right? We have this loop of action, sensing, considering goals, comparing action, and so on. So I want to invoke the idea that we need conversations, we need louder conversations, and we need collaborations to be more urgent and insistent toward action. Otherwise, we neglect our responsibilities. So cybernetics, how? Really? Are you serious? So what's a logical framework and how can we apply meta design? I'm going to move a little more swiftly here. This is a model called the analysis synthesis bridge model that comes from Doberly, Evanson, and Robinson. And the idea here is that you can describe a situation, the concrete in the lower left, which I've described. You can then expose the concepts and values under the concrete in the existing. You can counter those at an abstract level, and then you can produce a better future with concrete examples. And this is my structure for today. So I've described the situation. I want to expose the values that underlie AI and then continue on this formulation. So as I said, AI is here. It's based in digital technology. It forges a culture focused primarily on what computers can easily do, most often for profit. And there are values in the code of today's AI that are so often at odds with being human. I don't know that I have to argue that, but I'll give some examples in a bit. So my premise is that it's the digital culture that forges this way that AI is seeing the world on our behalf and pushing the world, most often for profit, and that these values are contradictory to being human. So what do I mean by digital culture? I would claim that digital culture assumes that interaction is mechanistic, right? Everything that you do is interpretable as well-defined and unambiguous, whether the machine is acting or you're acting. Information is objective, paralleling the first point. Each fragment of data is interpretable in an absolute way. Work with me here. I'm being a little bit oversimplifying. No, simplifying, but not oversimplifying. Intelligence, similarly, is thought to be in the computer. That's a smart refrigerator. That's a smart algorithm. And so it becomes true. We then think, the culture thinks, that human behavior can be generalized and predicted. That the same option, the same music track, the same product, the same Wikipedia entry would have the same meaning for everyone. This is the way these algorithms work. And ultimately, that prediction is intelligent and it need not be questioned. So some examples, you know all of these examples. PageRank, so Google search results, it's an algorithm called PageRank, you may recall. You can't learn why the options were offered. Up next, you can't question what YouTube is showing you next. Why is it showing me this video? I don't know. Wow, I'm really interested. I'm going down that rabbit hole. Oh my God, that's terrible. I will keep watching. I will believe what I am shown. And the Facebook news feed is similar. Now, I would claim that these algorithms have these problems. And that this is a kind of codifying, a codification of values. Now, let me be very dramatic now for a minute. This is something I do very often with students and sometimes in presentations. And I say to someone in the audience, ask me where there's good pizza. And they say, Paul, where's the good pizza? And I say, right across the street at Luigi's Pizza. And then I say, ask me, why is it good pizza? And they say, Paul, why is Luigi's Pizza good pizza? And I say, screw you, I'm not going to tell you. And of course, everybody is shocked. They can't believe I've actually said that. But what I've just done is I've described Google and Facebook. I've described a situation where these algorithms tell us something, but they don't tell us why they've told us that. And that's a problem. Now, my premise is, again, it's not the technology itself, it's how we make it. And it's how these platform companies go for profit and dazzle our brains. But this is not the only option. We can shift the technology from the digital assumptions and swing back toward our analog roots, physical, organic, biological selves. What would it be like if these algorithms brought us novelty and choice, transparency, and yes, conversation? So this is my counter. Can we upset the dominance of these algorithms by designing and propagating humane, organic, and let me call it for now, analog interactional frameworks? Not a perfect phrase, work in progress. Starting from cybernetics. So how do we do this? Well, let's do this pairing again. If we move to the cybernetic frame, interaction becomes something conversational. And we know that if you say something to me, that's not the data in the message coming to me like a commodity that's transferred objectively. What it means is that I'm triggered to think something, Maturana. So information is not objective, but it can bring my interpretation and ideas and create a rich set of possibilities for me and in my reaction to you. And intelligence is relational. It's not in a machine or in a person or in a computer. So let's go back and thinking of Luigi's Pizza as that negative instance. Can we change these interfaces such that I can say, I can get an answer, you can get an answer, why is Luigi's Pizza the best pizza? I would, the search engine would have to say, because it's open and across the street from you, because you have certain values and it supports sustainable sourcing, and because the reviews are good, in that order, more about the user and less about its interests. Similarly, can you ask the question from yourself? Can you control the focus as the user? Can you ask about the answer that you've been given in your terms? I'm interested in gluten-free. Can you help me with that? And also, can you redirect the conversation to somewhere else so the choice is coordinated and not in control of the algorithms? Now, you may recognize all of these things as essentially being about conversation. And conversation is analog, I wish to say. So can we make this shift where the code, the algorithms are about conversation and analog interactions rather than what we have today? And I would say that if so, then novelty and choice, transparency, and conversation would become the core principles of interaction. So in this structure, we're moving from here now to, okay, how do we get to this preferred future? How do we bring forth these replacements to the pernicious algorithms of today's AI? So the goal of the project I'm about to describe is to create and promote a new category of analog frameworks. Now, let me say a little bit more about analog. Let's do an opposition here. It's not perfect. My colleagues are constantly calling on me to change this or to claim it's not as black and white or red and blue as I seem to present visually, but work with me here. So data animated is one worldview, one's kind of culture, which is the one that I claim we're substantially in. But we live as humans in a socially animated world. So what are these oppositions? Now, again, let these kind of flow, think about it a little bit. Now I'm going to make it even more sort of black and white and stark. In a sense, all of the things on the left are transactional, and the attributes on the right are conversational. Right, that's what my Alexa does, and my Siri, what do they do? They bring me facts, they turn on my lights, they buy products. They're transactionally focused, but they don't have to be. They can be conversationally focused. And so this current opposition that I'm talking about between the digital and the analog could be united. We could have the best of what digital brings. Prediction is often good, narrowing choice is often good, but not when it's the only choice, the narrowing. So cybernetics for me brings this bilingual sensibility and helps us think about analogic frameworks. Alternatives to today's AI. Well, I can hear you saying, what are you talking about, Paul? Give me some examples. Well, I'm at the beginning of the journey of examples. But I have some that I think are unassailably powerful and appropriate here. And those of you who know my interests won't be surprised. This is the work of Gordon Pask. It's Colloquy of Mobiles. There are three large so-called female mobiles and black male mobiles. The gender issue doesn't matter here. They are robots. They are interacting with one another. They are living in an analog world. They are having a kind of conversation, and yet they're machines. This is, as the note says, from a reproduction that close colleague TJ McLeish and I built of the original mobiles, which were from Pask from '68 in London. So what's Pask all about? It's about analog interaction. The colloquy of mobiles are about autonomous agents that converse and cooperate. Sounds like what we would like to be doing with machines, for the humans to be autonomous and for the machines perhaps also to converse and cooperate. They already have a bilingual sensibility. They're analog and social. They're having a conversation about whether they want to interact. They do interact or they don't, and so on. It's machinic and digital at the same time. This reproduction, by the way, is entirely digital, whereas the original was a mix of digital and analog. So it doesn't matter what you're made out of, it matters what the algorithm is and what the ideas are behind. In these mobiles interacting, the information triggers a response. It doesn't determine it. It's not reactive. It's not forced interaction. It's responsive interaction in the human sense. And intelligence is in them. I mean, each mobile is not very bright, but the interactions are interesting. So the goals of conversation embody a desire to understand what makes conversation work and to make machines conversant. And can we rigorously understand how systems learn and make machines that learn like humans, that interact like humans? Wouldn't that be good? Can we bring this bilingual sensibility to the algorithms of the everyday world? Well, we as a society know about these things. Students I teach don't. The culture of Silicon Valley doesn't. What do we do about that? Well, perhaps we can bring about a bilingual synthesis by talking about modern implementations. And here a colleague of mine recently made an offer as part of this project that I'll describe further in a moment. What if you could build a system based in AI that has the advantages of AI, prediction, assembly of statistical inferencing that has value and doesn't roll over individual points of view and so on. An AI system that would facilitate conversations across distances and times that would generate a continually changing configuration. Sounds like a conversation to me. Can you mechanize this in a way that doesn't destroy the open-endedness and the analog quality of the conversation itself? These ideas could be sources of conversations that could provide new input and it would self-regenerate. And these would better embody the emancipatory and participative epistemology of cybernetics. This is my wonderful colleague, Larry Richards. So what have I shown? I've shown an older example from Pask, a new idea of the future. And now I'll give a little more structure and then end in time for discussion. So I mentioned a logical framework in meta design. I've just shown you the first order design in this logical framework of this analysis synthesis bridge model. But how can we now apply cybernetics to ourselves? Can we take Margaret seriously? Can we do some second order design? Can we be aware of our history and look at what ways we have used before of bringing about a change, bringing about a breakthrough? I'm sure you're familiar with this front page. The hint is at the bottom. It's the Macy Foundation. These are the proceedings of one of the many Macy meetings from the 1940s and 1950s. What was this all about? Well, it was a moment when there was an awareness that some new idea, some revolutionary idea, systems of purpose, as a form of study, And simultaneously, people like to say first order came first and second order came second. No, not quite. Wiener knew of second order. Didn't speak about it, perhaps for political reasons. It's a different level, right? Bateson knew it early on. You can see the diagrams from Bateson. So let's be second order a moment and perhaps invoke a NewMacy meetings. Let's look at the pattern from that and see whether applying it today would make sense. So as you know, these were conferences. Many, many disciplines came together and started a revolution. They called this field, I mean, obviously Wiener coined the phrase, although he learned later that Plato used it and Ampere had also used it and so on. But it's about steering, and the Macy meeting changed those worlds of science, engineering, and humanities. So do we have the audacity to do a revolution again? Do we need a revolution? This is an audacious idea. Why invoke the Macy meetings? Well, we've got these pandemics. We need what Macy meetings had and had brought us, transdisciplinary and so on. So is this a way to bring about this preferred future? Can we create and promote analog interactional frameworks in a Macy context? This is a slide, very brief. I don't want to spend time on this, but this is the energy behind what I'm talking about. It's a fairly specific plan to not just talk, but to find and promote examples from art, media, design, and technology, and anthropology, and sociology that are analog and interactional, and bring those to designers, students, teachers, entrepreneurs, business people, Silicon Valley, as a set of examples. As a set of examples to copy in the best sense. We've had a couple of meetings in this regard. Number 3 is on the 16th of October, and I invite you to come. Write to me, and I'm happy to invite. But wait a minute, Paul, this is really kind of outrageous. What right do you have to evoke Macy? Well, these were some of the circumstances of the original Macy meetings. And from 220 onward, we have a new world order. we have this wicked problem post-COVID. Digital is supreme now, whereas it was only rising in the original Macy meeting time of the 40s and 50s of the last century. And now we recognize these socio-technical entanglements. So we can't do it with a closed selection of participants. I would say we need an open network of collaborators. And in addition to being transdisciplinary, we need to be transglobal and inclusive and diverse and transgenerational, because we need not to teach those who are younger, but we need to know their understanding of the world and how they see it and how they want it, because they will inherit it. So in that context, these have been the activities, again, not to read in detail, but over the last year plus. These links are live. You can go to them if you download the PDF. We have an advisory council, which is growing. And these are the background facts of the NewMacy. Let me do a quick recap and then open for conversation. Today, I've argued that it's a digital culture that contributes to these issues of AI that are spoken of so often by so many today. I'm hardly a loud voice among many. And that thinking about it in terms of interaction, information, intelligence, that the human version of those is compromised. But can we better understand the analog versions? Again, analog is a metaphor. To be organic and conversational and humane, and can we use cybernetics to bring a bilingual sensibility to bridge these two? Not just by talking about it, but by promoting design patterns, working prototypes, collecting these, purveying them, talking about them, teaching them. And I say, this is why I do what I'm doing here, that it's urgent and it requires the scale and challenge that the NewMacy affords as a metaphor in both conversations and in meetings. So let us bring about this rich mesh of collaborations, and to be deliberate about it, to be thoughtful, to be aware both at the first order and the second order level, and to know what we wish to conserve. Again, Maturana. And then use the technology to serve those principles and to serve what we wish to conserve, rather than be pulled along by whatever the technology is doing to us. So we as a group are excited to see what can emerge, and we invite you to join us. Now, even after Margaret was slapped down in that original meeting, she didn't hesitate to return to that question, and she posed it again a decade later at the first conference of the ASC, the American Society in Cybernetics. And as she wrote at the time, she said, quote, "What in thunder are we founding if we don't apply our own ideas to our own doing?" And this is my question to all of you at WOSC. If we're not applying what we know to the pandemic world, then who is there who can do better? I'm not saying we are the leaders. I'm saying we are necessary. Cybernetics and systems is necessary. And isn't that what we should dedicate to? And of course, many of the presentations of this conference have been about this. So I'm not suggesting that what I'm saying is unrecognized. I'm saying it's not a big enough movement yet. And as Margaret was concerned, after she was slapped down, she kept going, "You can slap this down if you like." But Margaret's provocation about the responsibility that we have doesn't go away. So this is my offer for today. Thank you.
Thank you for the wonderful communication, Paul. And you threw it love, right? And yeah, we'll be glad to pick it up. But it's going to be an extensive amount of work, and it's going to be really hard to break the obstacles who have been set up to prevent researchers in cooperating globally. And I'm afraid that this is something needs to be addressed, as we wrote in the memorandum of WOSC 21. Maybe a few words by Vladimir or Raul on that.
Thank you very much.
Vladimir, you're muted.
Thank you very much.
Sorry. Paul,
Yeah, maybe Raul, if you wait for Vladimir to.
okay.
He started to. Yeah, Vladimir.
It is the best speech. Thank you very much for your speech. Very interesting ideas. Good luck in your study. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. I feel like I'm being tangible enough to chart a path. I'm not saying I will take down an internet platform. I'm not saying I will stop them. All I'm saying is that I will offer alternatives and hope that those alternatives inspire others to create more alternatives. I didn't go into a lot of depth about who we're looking into in terms of art and media and anthropology, but we have a list. And I've got 3 independent study students now here at Carnegie Mellon who will be working on this in some ways. And we've been having these bi-weekly meetings for some time. There's some credit for some of the individuals in the presentation PDF, but many more have been involved. And of course, the advisory council is profound. But I'm trying to be audacious on the one hand, and yet modest and pragmatic on the other. So,
Thank you.
Paul, I certainly loved what you said.
thank you.
It's very, very touching. Perhaps the question that comes to my mind is, what are the main restrictions you see in order to proceed with this?
So let's break that into two pieces. For our little initiative in NewMacy to build a compendium of examples and to offer them to the world, there are very few restrictions in that. That's the limit of our resources. We will apply for funding and to hope for enlarging the group also. I do think of it as a network, as one of the slides said. It's not just a small group that happens to be somewhat connected to the ASC, the American Society for Cybernetics, but rather I would like to see nodes in various places interested in different subsets of the problem and in other pandemics. So that part is our resource limitation. The more difficult thing, and perhaps the question you're really asking, is changing how the world sees and changing the nature of what these internet platforms do. There, the impediments are gigantic. They have to do with money and profit. They have to do with being stuck in old paradigms and not wishing to see the world in new ways. This is one of the reasons why the transgenerational aspect of it is so important to my heart. Because unless younger generations catch it and want it, then there's little point. So a lot of my emphasis is on trying to understand how to do that and how to gather momentum and get their interest. There is nothing more satisfying to me than when I'm one-on-one with, for example, one of my independent study students, and you can see her head just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And then we have to stop because there's so much to absorb and to think about. So that individual will change and will carry these ideas. And that's what I would like to see more and more and more.
Thank you.
Okay, maybe Victor Askiminin?
Yeah, can I ask?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much for your report. It was very interesting. And for me, especially your 4 squares: concrete, abstract, prototyping, and then interpretation. This is, for me, it's brilliant, because we are doing this 40 years. And we call first movement from concrete to abstract as conceptual cleaning. And then you operate with abstracts or knowledge or concepts. Yeah. What do you think to manipulate with these abstracts or concepts? We need a universal language, and we need a special tools to manipulate concepts, to add concepts together, to multiply them, to divide, and so on. So do you know any tools to manipulate concepts? Me? No, I know this. And you? Sorry.
It's a beautiful question. Let me try to answer briefly. Firstly, I can't take credit for that model. I've put in the chat from Dubberly Design Office, dubberly.com. It's the link I just put in. The paper on the analysis synthesis bridge model. And he has taken others' work and he's brought it into this very beautiful form that I use today. So that's number one. I have a particular affection for one of Pask's modeling tools, entailment meshes, but we don't have a good framework for that to purvey. Any kind of conceptual model that embodies the vocabulary, the language, the distinctions, and the relations among the objects claimed in that language, such as concept maps in their strict form, I think are valuable tools for conversation. These are not, what's the word, programmable models. They're not Club of Rome simulations, but they begin. I don't have a stronger answer than that. I appreciate the question. Maybe that's one of the things that we should do, Victor, is build a list of tools that are available for this kind of conceptual interaction.
You know, the main question, what is the element of knowledge? You know, the universal language to operate concepts and element of knowledge. When you find the answer for this question, as for me, I think axiomatic theories is the universal language to operate concepts. And there is a Bourbaki theory. They told that it's the most general mathematician apparatus. So
beautiful.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sorry.
I'd like to hear more about that. If you can put a reference in the chat, I'd love to see it. Thank you very much. I'm not familiar with that.
Okay.
There are some more hands and time is limited.
Yes,
Igor, would you like to moderate, please?
Arantatsu? Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much for your talk. And I have a question about the epistemology. As you did not refer to the epistemological dimension of the cybernetics approach. And could you elaborate on this? Or the question is, does the cybernetics of our era need an epistemology?
So for me, second order is
yes.
Implied, is present, is never not present, even in first order discussions from the 40s, so-called. The subjectivity of the situation and the language is there. Heinz von Forster. Yeah. What else can I say? That very much, very core to all of this, yes.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I think we have two more hands up, and let's go with these two more hands, and then we'll go to the sections, right? Okay, Professor Ray Eisen.
Hello, Paul. Thank you very much for your talk.
Thank you, Ray.
Paul, I want to evoke two people to frame my question. One's the work of Umberto Maturana, who makes the point that we humans live in language, and that you could go further and claim that actually in living in language, it's language that uses us rather than us who use language. And I certainly know from working with students that students who can speak multiple languages can become different people in different languages and experience the world differently. Now, if I combine that with the fact that Kurt Lewin was at the early Macy conferences and was one of the progenitors of the idea of group dynamics and feedback processes in social interaction, and add to that the work that's been done in the IFSR for many years on conversation and the design of conversation and the rules of conversation, perhaps building on the work of Worf and others. My question is, should the focus be on trying to change the digital world before we have actually changed our ability to live in language effectively ourselves?
I can't say that I have a better idea, Ray. I appreciate that provocation. Of course, I'm invoking Maturana all along, and you saw those references even when they weren't spoken by me to be there, and some were. You're offering a different tack. If you'd like to pursue this as another node in this network of NewMacy, to work on the language aspects of the culture of the global society, the way I hear your question, I would love to do that. So I have my preference of what I know I can do, and that's what I'm trying to guide. But the idea that another node would be created equal, if not more important than what I'm trying to do, I welcome it. So may I get in touch and discuss that further, Ray?
Yeah, please do, yes.
I will. Thank you so much, Ray.
Okay. Thank you. And now to Professor Peter Jones.
Hi, Paul, as you know, I'm very interested in the direction of the NewMacy initiative, and I appreciate how you're positioning this as a new agenda as well. I mean, so you're clearly with around the pandemic and the different nodes, and I'd say it also, you're positioning this as perhaps as a summit that might also be distinguished from other venues. I'd say you just mentioned the Club of Rome, and Club of Rome is holding to other agendas that, that have been continuing in a more technocratic direction. And I think that the NewMacy kind of position creates what could be a very different values preference. And so the vision is, so I wanted to ask you in the question, what do you envision for the follow-up? Let's say we hold a summit, we perhaps have multiple nodes on that summit and continuing conversations. But what kind of community of conversation do you envision that could follow? In other words, what's the entelechy here? Where might we be going together? Do you see the NewMacy conferences as a summit maybe happening every year, growing into something of a community? Just a little more on that vision.
Yes, it's a great question. Some other writing I've done about that, and the links again can amplify that. But to be brief here, I know where I am, and I know where we are as a group so far, and I know how we'd like to fan out and create an initiative, a community, really a set of conversations with nodes in a non-hierarchical way. It's evolved. I was originally thinking at the beginning we would hold these big meetings. That is resource intensive. It's organizational clarity intensive. And I found that I was encouraged by my colleagues to just think not NewMacy meetings, but NewMacy conversations, and ultimately NewMacy network. So the meeting that I mentioned, number 3, which is happening on the 16th of October, that will be some number of people, a few dozen perhaps, will be focused on specific topic areas that came out of NewMacy meeting number 2, which was only a few weeks ago. And we'll just see. I don't have a roadmap. I think it's a matter of seeing how we go. But the conversations are core, and the dissemination of our ideas and our thinking is also core, transgenerational, transglobal, transdisciplinary. That's as far as I can answer right now. Again, the documents have a little bit more about that. But how do we make it a network of conversations? Thank you.